Ohio is supposed to feel familiar. Flat highways cutting across cornfields, small towns with diners and gas stations, state parks where families roast marshmallows on summer weekends. It's the kind of place you drive through without thinking twice. But familiarity doesn't mean safety. In Ohio, cars are found still running on the interstate, their drivers gone as if plucked from the driver's seat. Entire towns receive letters from someone who knows their darkest secrets. Houses exist on paper, but not in reality. Hikers vanish on trails so short it should take 10 minutes to finish them. Even stranger are the echoes that refuse to die. A train that rumbles through the night on tracks torn up decades ago. Families who move into farmhouses and then simply disappear. Meals still on the table, clothes folded in drawers. These aren't legends, they're records, police files, and whispers that never quite faded in Ohio towns that remember everything. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this, you'll never see Ohio the same way again. And it starts with a white Oldsmobile left on Interstate 70 and a woman who never came back for it. Interstate 70 cuts straight across Ohio like a scar. Endless pavement, the hum of tires, the glow of headlights, and truck stop signs bleeding into the night. It's a road designed for speed, not for stopping, which is why the car on the shoulder looked so wrong. On the morning of August 2nd, 1990, a state trooper noticed a white Oldsmobile pulled onto the side of I-70 near Reynoldsburg. No hazard lights, no damage, just a car sitting there like it had calmly pulled over and then changed its mind about everything except the driver. The engine was off. The driver's door was closed. Inside were a purse, a set of keys, and a half-finished soda sweating in the cup holder, as if someone had just taken a sip and promised, "I'll be right back." The owner was Cynthia Anderson, a 20-year-old legal secretary from Toledo. She wasn't the type to vanish. She went to work, came home, paid bills, made plans. But in the weeks before her car was found on I-70, something in her life had shifted. Co-workers noticed she seemed nervous, jumpy. Someone had been calling her office phone, over and over. When she picked up, there were no words, only breathing on the line. She told a friend she felt like she was being followed on her commute, like the same car always appeared in the rearview mirror. A little too close, a little too often. When the trooper realized the Oldsmobile wasn't abandoned by mistake, the search began. Officers combed the area along the guardrail. Dogs were brought in and picked up her scent, following it along the shoulder for about half a mile. Then, without warning, the trail just stopped. No drag marks, no footprints veering off into the brush. It was as if someone had lifted her straight out of the world. Investigators considered abduction, but there were no signs of struggle. No broken glass from a smashed window, no skid marks suggesting a sudden stop or a chase. The car was perfectly intact, parked like an ordinary roadside stop. Only Cynthia was missing. Theories spread quickly. Some pointed to a client at her law office, suggesting a case had turned dangerous. Others whispered about a stalker she never named, someone who had escalated from phone calls to something far worse. But with no witnesses and no physical evidence, no charges were ever filed. Cynthia did not come home. No trace of her has ever been recovered. To this day, her family leaves flowers on the shoulder where her car was found, a small memorial to a life that ended without an ending. Drivers on that stretch of highway still slow down, glancing at the guardrail as if expecting to see someone standing there. One trucker swore that late one night he saw a woman on the median, pale, motionless, staring at the rushing traffic. When he stopped and got out, the median was empty. The Ohio Missing Persons Database still lists Cynthia Anderson as unresolved. Her file remains open. Her car remains in police archives. And the question still hangs over I-70. How can someone vanish on a road that never stops moving? Because in Ohio, silence doesn't just follow you home. Sometimes it writes you a letter sealing your fate in ink that no one can trace. Circleville looks like any other small Ohio town, a place of quiet streets, modest houses, and front porches where everyone claims to know everyone else. It's the kind of place where gossip usually dies out as fast as it starts. But in 1976, gossip didn't fade. It arrived in envelopes. It carried no return address, and it knew far too much. Residents started receiving letters out of nowhere. The handwriting was blocky and harsh, like someone carving words into paper. Inside, the message was always the same kind of thing: venom, The letters exposed affairs, accused neighbors of crimes, hinted at hidden addictions, money problems, and secrets no one thought anyone else knew. Some of them even predicted accidents, deaths, and scandals before they happened, turning every mailbox into a loaded weapon. The first main target was school bus driver Mary Gillespie. Her letter accused her of having an affair with the school superintendent, a man she worked with almost every day. The writer demanded she end it or be exposed. It didn't stop with her. Mary's husband received a letter too, just as cruel, just as specific. The words weren't vague threats. They were sharp, detailed, and personal, as if the writer had been sitting at their kitchen table, listening. Not long after, Mary's husband died in what police called a suspicious crash. He hit a tree, and the circumstances never sat right with everyone. Some believed the relentless letters pushed him to suicide. Others think he was forced off the road. But while the town tried to grieve and move on, the letters didn't stop. They multiplied. Dozens of people all over Circleville began receiving them. Some letters contained private medical details. Others described financial struggles, debts, and arguments that had only ever happened behind closed doors. Investigators were baffled. No fingerprints, no clear pattern, no witnesses. And still, the letters kept coming, sometimes hundreds within a single year. In 1983, suspicion finally settled on someone, Paul Freshour, Mary's former brother-in-law. The letters had touched his family too. Authorities accused him of being the anonymous writer. The case against him was controversial, but he was convicted and sent to prison. You'd think that would be the end of it, that locking him away would silence the town's tormentor. Instead, the story got stranger. The letters didn't stop. They kept arriving, some postmarked from counties hours away, while Freshour sat behind bars. Experts studied the handwriting. Some said it matched Paul's. Others said it looked deliberately disguised, like someone trying to frame him or like the original writer changing their hand just enough to confuse everyone. Freshour served 10 years. When he was released, the letters finally ceased, but he maintained his innocence until his death in 2012, insisting he had been set up, that the real writer or writers were still out there. Even today, the Circleville Letters remain one of Ohio's most unsettling mysteries. A whole town blackmailed and stalked by words scrawled in cheap ink. Marriages broken, friendships destroyed, lives twisted by sentences that should have been easy to ignore, but never were. Some residents believe the letters came from multiple people, a conspiracy fed by jealousy and revenge. Others whisper that whoever started it is still alive, watching, waiting for the right moment to begin again. One retired mail carrier told a story he never forgot. On his route in the late 82nds, he handed a letter directly to a woman on her porch. No stamp, no postmark. She opened it, glanced once, and screamed. It was a Circleville letter, as if it hadn't come through the postal system at all, just appeared where it needed to be. To this day, some mail carriers in town admit they still glance twice at certain envelopes, sharp, angular handwriting they swear they've seen before. Because in Circleville, the real weapon was never paper. It was knowledge no one was supposed to have. And if a letter can reach a house that way, what happens when the house itself doesn't belong in this world, but still shows up on your street? Latter Avenue is the kind of quiet street in Cincinnati you'd forget the moment you turned off it. Middle-class homes with trimmed lawns, trees arching over the sidewalks, kids' bikes tipped over in driveways. It's the picture of normal, except for one address that refuses to behave like the others. An address that shows up on paper, but not always in reality. The house first appeared in county property records in the 1952. 2 stories, brick exterior, a small front porch. The listed owner, a man named Robert Hayes. On paper, it looked like any other modest home on Latter Avenue, except the people who actually lived there said it didn't exist. Neighbors insisted there was no such house on that stretch of road. Where the address was supposed to be, they remembered only grass, trees, and an empty lot. No windows, no door, no mailbox, yet every year, like clockwork, the county sent out tax bills for that invisible home. And every year, those bills were paid on time, in full. No one in the neighborhood ever met Robert Hayes. No moving truck ever pulled up. No children ever ran across that particular patch of land. But someone, somewhere, was paying to keep a house on the books. In the 1972, The house surfaced again in property records, this time under a new owner's name. Once more, whispers began on the street. A few residents claimed they saw lights glowing at night, where the empty lot stood a soft, yellowish rectangle hovering in the darkness, like a window with curtains drawn. Others swore they heard footsteps on the sidewalk there, heavy and deliberate, as if someone were walking up to a front door that didn't exist. By the 1,990 seconds, city officials had had enough. The address, long considered a clerical embarrassment, was condemned and scrubbed from the files. For a while, it vanished. No listing, no taxes, nothing. But about 10 years later, the address reappeared. Same square footage, same brick exterior, same 2 stories, as if someone had reached back into old blueprints and insisted the house belonged there after all. A local historian decided to dig deeper. In the archives, he found the property cards, each one carrying a small black and white photograph taken by inspectors. The image for the Latter Avenue house showed a brick home. All right, but something was off. The shadows from the supposed streetlights fell in directions that didn't match the real road. The trees in the background didn't exist anywhere along Latter Avenue. It was like a picture taken in a place that looked almost, but not quite, like the street everyone knew. In 2003, 2 college students, having read about the legend online, went to find the lot just past midnight. They claimed they saw it, a house standing where everyone else had always seen emptiness, curtains drawn, a single light glowing in an upstairs window. They stared for a few seconds, terrified but unable to look away. When they came back with friends in the daylight, there was nothing but bare ground and weeds bending in the breeze. City officials still dismiss the whole thing as a mix of clerical error and urban myth, but the records keep resurfacing every decade or so, with new names attached to the deed, new tax bills always paid by people no one has ever met. One retired mail carrier swore he delivered letters there in the 1,960 seconds. He remembered a black mailbox bolted to a brick wall, the rough texture of the house under his fingers when he brushed against it. When someone showed him the empty lot today, he just shook his head. "That's not what I remember," he whispered. "The house was there. I touched it." Neighbors say that on humid summer nights, the lot feels wrong, like stepping into thicker air. The temperature seems to drop. The hairs on your arms rise, and if you stand at just the right angle on the sidewalk and squint, you might see the faint outline of a roof, shimmering against the dark like heat mirage in reverse. One man stepped onto the lot once, determined to prove it was nothing more than a story. He came back pale, clutching a scrap of paper he said he'd found half buried in the dirt. It was a property tax receipt, dated 1962. The ink didn't look 40 years old. It looked fresh. The house never burned. It was never officially demolished. It simply drifts in and out of the city's memory, anchored only by records no one can erase and money no one can trace. And people still wonder, if the house doesn't exist, who keeps paying the bills? Because if a house can haunt a street without standing on it, what chance does a boy have on a short, marked trail in Hocking Hills, when even his footprints don't stay long enough to lead him home? Hocking Hills is one of Ohio's postcard places. Marked trails, wooden bridges, caves carved by centuries of water. Families filling the campgrounds every summer with campfires, s'mores, and stories that are supposed to stay safely in the realm of fiction. It's not the kind of place where anyone expects a person to simply vanish, and yet, in October of 2016, one boy did. 13-year-old Evan Phillips came to Hocking Hills with his parents and younger sister. They set up camp near Old Man's Cave, one of the most popular, heavily visited areas in the park. The day was ordinary in the way you only recognize later, when you're replaying every second. A tent going up, a cooler dragged from the trunk, the crunch of leaves under boots, the sort of details you never think you'll be forced to remember. By afternoon, Evan asked to grab something from the car. It was a simple favor, barely a 5-minute walk from their campsite along a well-worn path. His parents agreed. They could still see the trail from where they stood. He walked off with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing you'll be right back, except he wasn't. At first, no one panicked. 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 stretched to 30. His parents called his name, expecting him to pop out of the trees with an armful of snacks or a forgotten jacket. Instead, there was only the wind sighing through the gorge. The parking lot was checked next. The car was still locked. No broken windows. No sign he'd ever reached it. Rangers were alerted. and the search began. Dogs were brought in. They picked up Evan's scent on the path leading toward the lot and followed it for about 200 yards. Then, just like that, the trail ended. No sharp turn into the woods, no sign of a struggle, no disturbed dirt. It was as if he had simply walked out of the world in one step. Searchers combed the caves, ravines, and side trails. Helicopters scanned the forest with infrared, looking for any trace of body heat. Riverbeds were checked, along with cliff edges and hidden drop-offs. Nothing. The next day, rangers found something that only deepened the mystery. Evan's backpack, resting neatly against a tree. Inside were snacks, a flashlight, and his jacket, things he would have needed if he'd decided to run away or gotten lost. The forest had been soaked by rain overnight, but the backpack was bone dry, as if it had been placed there that morning, carefully, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. For weeks, the search widened. Flyers with Evan's face appeared at gas stations, diners, and trailheads across the state. Leads came in, then fizzled out. One hiker swore she saw a boy matching his description, walking deeper into the forest. Barefoot, his expression empty, like he was sleepwalking. By the time she reported it, he was gone. Locals whisper about the spot where the backpack was found. They say electronics flicker there. Phone batteries drain in minutes. GPS units freeze or spin uselessly. One searcher claimed he heard a voice calling his name from the trees, not just any voice, but in the exact tone his wife uses when she's annoyed with him. When he turned, no one was there. Others who camp too close to Old Man's Cave talk about footsteps circling their tent after midnight. Soft, slow, measured. When they unzip the flap, there's nothing, just the dark weight of the forest pressing in. Some chalk it all up to fear and imagination. Just another campfire story in a place that's earned plenty of them. But one ranger put it in a way that no one has managed to argue with. Evan didn't just get lost, he said. Lost people leave trails. He didn't. Hocking Hills remains open. Families still hike the marked paths. The signs still reassure visitors that the trails are well maintained and safe. But every October, when the leaves start to fall and the air turns sharp, people glance a little longer at the trees and wonder how a boy could vanish on a short walk he should have finished in minutes. And when the wind shifts through the gorge, some swear they hear a child's voice, asking softly if you've seen the way out. Because if footsteps can disappear in Hocking Hills, what explains the sound of a train in Marysville, a train that screams through the night on rails that were torn up decades ago? Marysville used to be a railroad town. Trains were its heartbeat, lines of steel cutting straight through its fields, carrying freight and passengers across Ohio. People got used to the rhythm, the distant horn, the rattle of wheels, the ground trembling as cars rolled past. Then by the 1,970 seconds, most of those rails were torn up. Engines stopped coming. Crossings went quiet. The town moved on. At least, it tried to. The sounds never did. It started with late-night calls to the sheriff's office. Farmers, awake in the small hours, reported hearing the unmistakable whistle of a locomotive rushing across the empty land. Dogs went wild, barking at the darkness. Windows shook in their frames, rattling dishes in cupboards. But when deputies drove out to check, their headlights swept over nothing but flat fields and the faint scars where tracks used to run. No light, no engine, no train. By 1981, the stories had spread beyond farmhouses. Teenagers parking on back roads claimed their cars trembled as if a freight train had just roared past, inches away. One couple swore their headlights flickered, then died completely, plunging them into darkness. In the same instant, a wall of sound smashed into the still night air, metal grinding on metal, a horn blaring so loudly they covered their ears. And then, silence. When they finally stepped out, there was only corn rustling in a normal, indifferent breeze. The sheriff's office dismissed most of it as nerves and imagination, old habits echoing in people's heads. But the town soon got something harder to ignore: tape. In 1986, a group of ham radio operators set up equipment near the old rail line, hoping to capture unusual interference. Late one night, their recording filled with static, then shifted into something disturbingly clear. The sound of a train whistle rose in the noise, followed by the screech of brakes fighting against speed. It didn't match any schedule from any active line nearby. The men swore they were miles from the nearest working track. Later that same year, A family living near the old depot reported hearing a train arrive at exactly 2:15 a.m. every night. Not once in a while. Every night. The mother described the sound as painfully vivid, wheels grinding, brakes screaming, a final metallic shudder like cars coupling or uncoupling. The windows rattled so hard she thought they'd crack, but when she looked outside, the street was deserted. No lights, no engine, just an empty space where the platform used to be. In 1993, a local historian decided to test the legend himself. He set up a tape recorder in a vacant field where tracks once lay and let it run. The recording, which you can still find archived in a small-town museum, starts with static. Slowly, the roar of an approaching locomotive swells, growing louder and closer. The whistle blasts twice, piercing and shrill, and faintly beneath the noise a voice can be heard. Step back. The historian insists he was alone when he recorded it. No one near him. No one speaking. Just him, an old tape deck, and an empty field that felt anything but empty. By the early 2000s, the phenomenon had its name, the ghost train of Marysville. To outsiders, it sounds like folklore. To people who live there, it's something else. Too many have felt the ground tremble under their feet, as if something massive were barreling past. Too many have heard the rush of wind and the clatter of invisible wheels. One man claims he actually saw it. He was driving along a back road when he noticed motion out of the corner of his eye. Turning his head, he saw a locomotive made of shadow sliding across the fields, its windows glowing a weak, ghostly white. No tracks, no railbed, just the engine, rolling through corn as if the stalks weren't there. He said it slowed as it neared the old depot site, hissed like steam escaping, and then simply faded, taking the sound with it. Today, no trains run through Marysville. The rails are gone, the crossings are paved over, but each year, new reports surface of a whistle slicing through the night, brakes screaming in the dark, and the ground trembling beneath feet and tires. Those who've heard it agree on one detail that never varies. The invisible train always stops, always comes to a halt just out of sight, as if it's waiting for someone to take a step too far. And if a phantom train can return to a town that removed its tracks, what happens on a farm where entire families vanish, leaving their homes locked, their food on the table, and their lives paused mid-sentence? Malabar Farm is usually remembered for its famous owner, author and conservationist, Louis Bromfield, a place of innovation, agriculture, and even Hollywood glamour when movie stars visited his estate. Tour guides talk about the farmhouse, the fields, the literary legacy. But the land around Malabar holds another story, one that never made it into any of Bromfield's books. It doesn't belong to the tours or the plaques. It belongs to the edges of the property, where people tried to build ordinary lives and then simply didn't finish them. In the late 1940s, several small farmhouses were built on land bordering the Malabar property. Modest homes leased to tenant families, surrounded by acres of pasture and corn. The pattern was always the same at first. A family would move in, unload furniture, start tending the fields. Neighbors would see smoke rising from chimneys, kids running through the grass, laundry snapping on clotheslines, life taking root. And then, without warning, it would stop. The Reynolds family vanished this way in 1949. For 3 days, neighbors noticed something wrong. No one seen in the yard. No smoke from the chimney. The usual sounds of a working farm animals. Tools' voices had gone eerily still. Eventually, concerned neighbors went to check the house. What they found inside didn't look like people who had packed up and left. Sunday dinner sat half-eaten on the table, plates still full, glasses half-drained, chairs pulled back, as if the family had all stood up at the same time for some unseen reason and never sat down again. The front door was locked from the inside. There were no overturned chairs, no broken dishes, no blood, no note. Sheriff's deputies searched the property, then the fields. No tracks leading away, no luggage missing. The Reynolds family was simply gone. They were never seen again. 2 years later, it happened again. Another tenant family disappeared from a different farmhouse on the property's edge. This time, it was a farmer from down the road who noticed the livestock crying for days, animals bawling, restless, as if waiting for a hand that never came. When he went to investigate, he found the barn full, tools neatly arranged on hooks, one gate left unlatched enough for cows to wander. Inside the house, the radio was still playing, droning softly to an empty room. Dishes sat drying by the sink, clothes lay folded at the foot of beds, no suitcases missing, no signs of a rushed departure. Once again, deputies found no footprints leading away from the house, no indication of where an entire family could have gone. The pattern was chillingly familiar. Lives interrupted mid-motion, with no explanation for why they never resumed. Whispers spread through the nearby communities. Some said the land itself was cursed, restless, unwilling to let anyone settle there who didn't truly belong. Others pointed to old stories of Native American burial grounds, rumored to lie beneath parts of the property, places you weren't supposed to disturb. With each disappearance, the tenant houses seemed less like homes and more like traps. By the mid-1950s, several of the tenant houses standing on Malabar's fringes were abandoned for good. The county quietly condemned them. Records were sealed. The buildings decayed, then were eventually removed, leaving only uneven ground and scattered foundations hidden beneath weeds. The official story faded. The unofficial one didn't. Hikers who visit Malabar today sometimes talk about parts of the trail that feel wrong, areas where the air suddenly turns cooler, heavier, as if you've stepped into someone else's memory. Some claim to hear children laughing just beyond the tree line, though no houses stand there anymore, and no children are allowed that far off the marked paths. Others swear they've seen candlelight moving slowly across the fields at night, bobbing gently like a family carrying lanterns toward a home that isn't there. Locals say that if you walk the property at dusk, where those tenant houses once stood, you should look down. Every now and then, in freshly turned soil, people report seeing footprints. Small, bare feet. The prints never travel far. They don't lead toward the road or the farmhouse. They just stop. 6 mysteries. 6 reasons to see Ohio differently. A car left on the interstate, its driver gone. Letters that poisoned a town. A house that exists only in records. A boy erased from a safe state park trail. A train that rumbles without rails. And families who walked out of their own lives, leaving everything behind. These aren't just ghost stories. They're files, names, timelines, echoes of lives that should have gone on but didn't. If you stayed until the end, thank you. Leave a like if Ohio unsettled you tonight. Tell us in the comments which mystery haunted you the most and which state we should step into next. And if you're ready for more, the playlist is waiting for you. Just remember, some roads never take you where you think they will, and some doors, once opened, don't close again.